one of the key people behind Multichoice, a leading newspaper editor, and then the head of the country's biggest media conglomerate. Vosloo has just published his autobiography. It traces his career back from the Eastern Cape, a fascinating reporting life under PW Botha, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and also he references the survival of the Afrikaans language. The book is called Across Boundaries, A Life in the Media in a Time of Change. Vosloo, a very warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us. I want to start with this, if I can. Your reporting career, you were at the nexus of change in South Africa. You were a leading newspaper editor. I wonder if it was tougher to be an editor then than it is today. You must have thought about that.
Yes, I think we editors today have it easy because we have a constitution that guarantees your freedom of speech. We did not have that. And as you well know, we had quite a few editors sent to jail for offending the government of the day. It's a fantastic situation. I'm very proud of South Africa and the constitution that we do have this independence, which is vital to the future of our democracy.
Are you worried, though, about the scaling down of media in South Africa? Smaller newsrooms, diminishing investment. We hear this, the whole thing about the juniorization of the business. I mean, that must have an impact on the product that we're putting out, whether it be newspapers, radio, or television.
I am absolutely worried. This is a worldwide trend. And there are different models people are trying, but we must accept the fact that the new technology, digitization, has come to stay. And it's just the fact that younger people don't read in print anymore, except for books, which has made a comeback, which is another story. But the fact is, yes, juniorization is taking place. People have to cut back because the income is not there. And they have to find a new stream of income, and they are all trying to do that via e-news and all that sort of thing. And there is something going out of our society, and that is the good old newspaper read with in-depth articles. I maintain I'm probably too old, but the fact is, you read a think piece, when you read it in print, it really sinks in, gives you some ideas to
food
pursue.
for thought perhaps resonates a little bit.
When it's a quick take on a e-news type of thing, e-digitization, it doesn't sink in that much, you know.
Vosloo, let me dive into the book if I can. 1981, you wrote a column about the need for white nationalists to sit down with the ANC, possibly ahead of your time. What informed that column, and how did it go down at the time?
It's quite an easy lead why I wrote that column. At that time, and it wasn't very apparent, the South African government, Foreign Affairs, were negotiating in secret in Geneva with SWAPO for the independence of Namibia. Now, SWAPO was an African, a black nationalist movement. And I just made the deduction that someday we'll have to sit down and talk with the nationalist ANC, because I never subscribed to the thesis that the ANC was a communist organization. Like Afrikaners, they were black nationalists, Afrikaners white nationalists, and they were looking for a way out. And I just put two and two together and I said, they will have to talk.
Do you think that column in any way moved the needle?
I do think so. I'm not vain or conceited to think so, but it got such a lot of attention internationally. I was a hero for a week. But in South Africa too, I got a lot of support. The only guy who really stripped the hide of my back was Mr. PW Botha, the Prime Minister. But then, you know, my skin is pretty thick.
I guess being in newspapers or in the media, you have to. You've opened the portal into PW Botha. You are not complimentary about the man in this book at all. How angry was he?
Look, he was a real straatvechter, a street fighter. He came through the organizational politics of the National Party, and he was in many scraps and fights, literally throwing chairs at opponents. And he had his good points, but he was uncouth. And I really think he let the country down in a big way. But of course, the big criticism against him was, what about the black people? And then he blew his top and he blew the Rubicon, didn't pursue it. But he was an unwise leader, and I don't think we would have had a deal with Mandela if he stayed on. He would have, at some point, would have dug in his heels and just overthrow the whole process.
Let's move post-Mandela, and again, in the book, you write about Naspers coming in for a degree of criticism about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and a decision not to appear. You use the word for not appearing as loyal or loyalty. What does that mean, and who are you being loyal to, and do you regret not going down a different path?
We were asked to appear before the Commission with a circumscribed invitation, going back in a period. And I said, but the whole of Naspers, they should know where we come from. There was no secret. The company was formed in 1915 to support the National Party. So in that sense, I said to go in there and just ditch where you came from would be the utmost form of disloyalty to all the good people that built up this business and the editors who were courageous to fight the ruling party.
You also apologize for supporting the National Party as Naspers for such a long time, though, don't you?
Yeah, I think we became wise after the event, but the fact is I was editor of a newspaper built in Johannesburg, which was never a party organ. The party organs were the ones in the Cape and the old Transvaal. But we were, in a sense, free. So we were verlig, as we called it, enlightened. And we had no loyalty towards the Nat Party in the stringent sense as it was with, say, the Burger or the Volksblad in the Free State or the old Transvaal.
You devote, Ton Vosloo, a chapter to Koos Becker, who essentially started pay television in South Africa. You call him a driving force, a talisman. Where would Naspers be today, and obviously the investment in an organization like Tencent, for instance, in China, without the vision of someone like that? What did you see in him?
I was very fortunate to realize what pay TV meant in 1983, 84, when he contacted me. As I say in the book, if somebody else had been in my shoes, they may not have realized what it was. No, that was the turning point.
You came in for quite a lot of resistance in that respect, didn't you?
Not really, not from my board. I couldn't be bothered about other people. I had a wonderful board, very enlightened, and I put the proposition to them because I was fairly new in the job, and I knew a board would not, when a new guy takes over and he comes with a request, they wouldn't slap him down. You know, they didn't want to discourage any renewal. There were a lot of wise people in my board, and they accepted, okay, Naspers was in favor of renewal. So they gave me, I asked 50,000 rand to appoint Koos Becker and an office and a secretary. And today it's interesting, I just read the other day, Multichoice in the unbundling is maybe worth between 110 billion rands. So it's not a bad investment.
Not a bad investment. What do you think about the separate listing of Multichoice? Is that a good thing? Why do you think that's happening?
I think it's a good thing because it's a regulated business. And in a sense, if one looks at the structure today, Naspers could be seen as to be too white. But the fact is, there's a point that nobody's actually raised, and that is that being a regulated business, you're open to the whims of the politicians. Now Multichoice will become basically black-owned, black-run, and more in tune with what the government wants in the long run.
In what respect?
In other words, I don't think the issue will come up as to the ownership so much.
But Multichoice itself is also under threat, surely, with things like Netflix, for instance, coming on. I mean, is that pay TV model, not only here, but maybe around the world, under a degree of pressure? Must be, sure.
Lots of pressure.
Yeah.
If you look 10 years down the road, I don't think people were going to sit watching TV on screens. I mean, the young people already are using smaller devices. No, the whole thing is opening up, and I think Multichoice is quite aware of it, and they are adapting. And they also have their counterpart towards Netflix and so on. You'll get information through different models or...
Well, I hope you're wrong about people not watching TV within the next 10 years, but we can move on from that. You also write about the battle for survival of Afrikaans in this country? As a luminary in the community, what are you worried about?
My main worry is that we have a constitution which guarantees the language rights of people, and Afrikaans is one of them, but it is steadily being eroded or just ignored by the government. If we talk about legislation being adopted only, signed off by the president in English. So in courts of law it will have no real standing. My problem is when a language loses its constitutional place, then you go down towards the level of festivals and singing and dancing, which does not bode well for the future of the language as a language of accepted language. And my thesis is also Afrikaners and Afrikaans-speaking people should not bat on their own. They should take hands of other minority languages and go to the government to say, listen, you have a duty to protect our culture and our language, all the languages, not Afrikaans only.
I wonder what you think of an organization like AfriForum.
Not a big fan of them. I'm very blunt in saying it. I do think they bat too much for the Afrikaners and Afrikaans speakers instead of looking across all the boundaries where there are lots of Afrikaans people of color, diversity. That should bring them in tune with the South Africa that I would like to see.
Just a final question, Ton Vosloo, and I wish we had more time, but that's the nature of television. You ask the question about whether Naspers, this global media organization now, still has a soul. As someone who was in the belly of the beast, I wonder why you ask that question, and what would define the soul of a media company?
Well, having been a print medium business for most of the 90 years of its 103 years old existence, the point is a soul was built up in that era. It's almost like the New York Times, but now it's been eroded, and you get all sorts of new forms of communication, and people are not so cohesive anymore. In the olden days, you had tea time around a cup of tea, and you chatted, and you had drinks together when the paper went to press in the evenings. Nowadays, it's all gone. It's that old feeling is not there anymore, but that is superficially answering your question.
But it's also, I guess, about the changing nature of media, isn't it?
The point is that Naspers, the soul was centered on Afrikaans nationalism. That's all gone. We have a different audience now. That audience cuts across all colors and boundaries. So there's no soul to refer to.
So it's a different soul.
A different one, if we can talk of a soul in this diverse world.
All right, Ton Vosloo, thank you. The book is called Across Boundaries, A Life in the Media in a Time of Change. That's it from us for this week. You can weigh in on all our featured stories on Facebook and on Twitter. Until next time, goodbye to you. Thank you for watching.